However, Yoonha remained nervous and asked Gumiho to report to the police if anything happened to her. She expressed her concern about safely returning home the next day. Meanwhile, Juwon arrived home and his gang members bowed down to greet him. He handed the box containing the clay toy to one of the men, instructing him to place it carefully on the living room shelf, and emphasized its worth of 100 million won. The man, curious about the high value, opened the box carefully and was shocked to see the clay toy inside. The rest of the gang gathered around, equally stunned and unable to comprehend why Juwon spent such an enormous amount on a simple clay doll. They began to worry about Juwon's mental state, whispering among themselves that something must be seriously wrong with him and questioning whether they should forcibly admit him to the hospital. Suddenly, Ileong scolded the men, reminding them of their loyalty and respect for Juwon. The man who had opened the box tried to defend himself, but Ileong cut him off, emphasizing the kind of person Juwon was. He recounted how, after the Bulldog faction had taken control of the Southwest Gangsters through Juwon's combat prowess, Juwon's father had handed over the organization to him. On that day, Juwon had disbanded the Bulldog faction, urging only those willing to wash their hands of the criminal life to follow him, promising them a stable life. Juwon had immediately established a meat processing company called Thirsty Deer, showing such decisiveness that he became a legend in the gangster world. Ileong's words reminded everyone of Juwon's leadership and the opportunity he had given them to live respectable lives. The members, realizing their error, agreed, acknowledging Juwon as their savior who had allowed them to live like humans. A man expressed his disbelief, questioning why Juwon would spend 100 million won on a clay doll unless he had lost his mind. Ileong explained that the doll was made by the janitor disguised as a killer. The man remained perplexed, asking why Juwon would spend so much on it. Frustrated, Ileong scolded them for not thinking critically. He speculated that Juwon might be trying to recruit the woman, considering her potential value to their group. Ileong emphasized that instead of disposing of her, it would be more advantageous to have her join them, highlighting her brilliance and potential usefulness. The members, impressed by Ileong's insight, praised him for his understanding. Mingyu, the youngest among the 12 members, voiced his concern, noting that Juwon seemed a bit strange lately. When asked why, Mingyu explained that he had seen Juwon taking out all his clothes from his closet and staring at them, trying them on and off repeatedly in front of the mirror. The others dismissed Mingyu's worry, pointing out that they all wore the same suit and saw nothing unusual about it. Frustrated, someone yelled at Mingyu, who then backed down, realizing it might not be a big deal. Meanwhile, Juwon was lost in thought, wondering if Yoonha would remember him after their 3 meetings. Young Yoonha, sobbing, urged young Juwon to play with her, calling out Appa Jibal tilde. Juwon, aware that the teacher would come soon, tried to reason with her, saying they could play after class. But Yoonha, sniffling, pleaded for just a moment more, insisting on playing a little bit longer. Juwon couldn't deny her and agreed to play for 10 minutes. They started building a sand home together, with Juwon asking if she was going to make a window too. Yoonha confirmed and requested him to make one in a specific spot, explaining that it was a room where a beautiful princess lived. Juwon laughed, teasing her by asking if it was like the beautiful princess Yoonha. Blushing, Yoonha thought about it and considered that if there was a prince, he would be someone like Hyun-woo, who played with her and played the piano well. She thought to herself that when she grew up, she wanted to marry Hyun-woo. Yoonha woke up suddenly, startled by the dream where someone had destroyed the sand home she and young Juwon had built together. In the dream, that person had called out to her, causing her fear. As she caught her breath, Yoonha huffed in frustration, trying to make sense of the dream. She wondered aloud why Hyun-woo appeared in her dream after such a long time, and why the gangster boss had also made an appearance. She couldn't help but connect it to the events from the auction of that company yesterday. Curious, Yoonha checked her phone and noticed a notification mentioning Thirsty Deer. She quickly searched for information about it, finding out that it was a large company with over 500 employees. The company had hired reformed criminals to improve its image as a social enterprise. However, despite its official description as a meat processing company, Yoonha couldn't shake off the suspicion that it might be connected to the gangster world in some way. Yoonha stood in front of her wardrobe, trying to decide what to wear. As she sifted through her clothes, she couldn't help but feel anxious. Gumio's words echoed in her mind. What if the boss started to have feelings for her? What if he said something like, "You're the first one to break my ribs"? The thought sent a chill down even his spine. She quickly shook her head, dismissing the idea with fear. Never, she thought to herself, that should never happen. After some time, Yoonha dressed herself up intentionally in a way she believed would not be attractive to Juwon, hoping he would dislike her appearance. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she thought her outfit was quite plain and unappealing. Trembling with fear, she scolded herself for not even trying to look good for the gangster boss. When Juwon arrived, he was dressed handsomely and attractively, drawing admiration from those around them. Yuna couldn't help but notice how impressive he looked despite the early September heat. Feeling nervous, Yuna greeted him awkwardly when he approached her. "Hello, I'm Yuna. Nice to meet you for the first time," she managed to say. Ju-won introduced himself as Seo Ja-won, and then an awkward silence fell between them. Yuna felt the tension and wondered why there was such silence. She felt the urge to say something to break the awkwardness. After breaking the silence, Yuna apologized, acknowledging that she had been rude last time they met. Ju-won, feeling embarrassed, avoided making eye contact and reassured her that his injury wasn't serious, so she needn't worry about it. Yuna noticed his discomfort and wondered why he was avoiding eye contact. She then expressed her gratitude to him for helping Seo-hyun receive good treatment. Ju-won replied that he was glad he could assist. Trying to ease the tension, Ju-won asked if she had had lunch yet. Yuna, feeling extremely nervous and on the verge of fainting, internally struggled with her anxiety. Externally, she replied that she liked all kinds of food. Ju-won then began walking and suggested taking her to a place he knew. As Yuna followed Ju-won, she couldn't help but notice people staring at her in her less than attractive outfit. Suddenly, she spotted a frog headband and thought about how perfect it would be for making a frog egg video. While lost in these thoughts, she realized Ju-won was walking ahead without her noticing and hurried to catch up. In her haste, she accidentally bumped into him. She then noticed Ju-won looking at a spot where a woman had just been, prompting her to wonder if he was interested in that woman. Ju-won's disappointed reaction made Yuna anxious, and she nervously asked him what he didn't like. Ju-won politely asked Yuna for a moment of her time, requesting her to wait for him for 5 minutes. Yuna, feeling flustered, agreed to wait while he stepped towards the building where the woman had entered. Observing this, Yuna made assumptions, recalling recent news about Gangster allegedly selling a woman to a bar. She wondered what they should do if this turned out to be the case and decided to follow the woman into the building. Inside, she discovered it was a women-only loan business. Yuna had observed as Ju-won held a paper that appeared to be a loan agreement, noting the ominous warning about consequences for non-payment. Ju-won commented to himself that they conducted business in this manner. The woman approached him and asked for her loan agreement back. Nearby, a frightened receptionist made a call, reporting a person with facial scars and requesting urgent assistance from the manager. Ju-won tore up the loan agreement, prompting the woman to react in shock and anger, demanding to know who he thought he was speaking to in such a manner. Ju-won asked the woman about the reason behind borrowing money, curious about what compelling story led her to take out a loan. She explained that she wanted to go on a trip with her friends. Ju-won advised her sternly to return home quickly, considering herself fortunate and to avoid dealing with loan sharks in the future. Angered by his interference, she confronted him, questioning why he was meddling in her affairs and pointing out that someone owed her 3 million won for her travel expenses, challenging him to lend her the money instead. Ju-won shouted at the woman, showing her the calculations. If she borrowed 3 million won with a 12% weekly interest rate compounded, he explained how quickly the debt would escalate. Meanwhile, Yoon had examined the torn-up paper and noticed it stated a 12% interest rate repayable after 90 days per share. Ju-won continued to emphasize the growing debt with compound interest, leaving the woman shocked and speechless. Yuna added that the amount would reach 4,725,558 won after 1 month, 7,427,890 won after 2 months, and 11,687,928 won after 6 months if early repayment wasn't made, totaling nearly 12 million won. The woman was incredulous at the realization. Yuna explained to the woman the staggering amount she would owe due to compound interest, projecting it to be over 57 million won in 6 months, and an astronomical 1,807,500,773,041 won in a year. Hearing this, the woman became visibly scared and started trembling, admitting she didn't realize the severity of borrowing from loan sharks, and had only planned to repay it through part-time work after a trip. Yuna advised her to always calculate compound interest before signing any contract and urged her to be cautious in the future. Feeling relieved and eager to move on, Yuna turned to Ju-won and suggested they go eat. Ju-won agreed and they headed off together. As they were about to leave the building, 3 intimidating individuals barged in wielding bats. One of them addressed Ju-won directly, questioning his presence in their business. Yuna, visibly frightened by their appearance, saw them as another group of gangsters. However, Ju-won remained composed and calmly positioned himself between Yuna and the goons. He casually replied that he had stopped by and intended to enjoy a cup of coffee. The goon questioned why he was interfering in their affairs, to which Ju-won responded by adjusting his tie, a subtle gesture signaling readiness for whatever might transpire. The goons were taken aback by Ju-won's confident demeanor and response, unsure of how to proceed next. After the goon's companion whispered to their leader about lacking resources, the leader's stern gaze made Yoonha nervous. Sensing the tension rising, the companion suggested they leave for the day since they were outnumbered, warning that their boss's patience had limits. Ju-won responded with a smirk, directing a message to Goyang-hee to handle his responsibilities properly. This enraged the leader, who charged towards Ju-won to strike him, but Ju-won swiftly countered with a kick that sent him crashing down. He then calmly asked if anyone else wanted to challenge him, but the others were intimidated into silence. With a sigh, Ju-won dismissed them as cowards, unimpressed by their show of force. Ju-won then suggested they leave, urging Yoonha to move quickly. As they exited the building, Yoonha was visibly shaken, and the woman who had been involved earlier expressed concern for her well-being. Despite Yoonha insisting she was fine, Ju-won noticed her distress and called out to her, reaching out to support her. Yoonha found comfort in Ju-won's presence and the fresh mint scent he exuded. She leaned against him for a moment, feeling a sense of security, but quickly regained her composure when Ju-won asked if she was okay. Feeling embarrassed by her momentary vulnerability, she assured him she was fine, attributing her brief dizziness to the situation. As the woman approached Ju-won and apologized sincerely, expressing gratitude and a desire to treat him to a meal, Yoonha was taken aback by her sudden change in behavior. She wondered how someone who had been so provocative earlier could now be so deferential. However, Ju-won seemed unfazed by the woman's gestures and instead turned to Yoonha, asking if she was still feeling unsettled after the earlier confrontation. The woman, shocked and unable to comprehend being ignored by Ju-won, stood confused by his apparent disregard. Ju-won explained to the woman that his actions weren't a reflection of a movie-like gangster persona, emphasizing that such ideals were unrealistic. Yoonha thought his words were well-spoken and acknowledged their truth. Ju-won then mentioned that he might need to go to the company due to potential trouble with the men from earlier. He apologized to Yoonha for the situation. Yoonha reassured him that there was no need for an apology outwardly, but internally she didn't want to have a meal with him in the first place. Ju-won left, mentioning he would contact